Man, what an amazing share event that was. I got to say something. Our leadership to church member ratio has got to be like one of the highest in the country. I was talking to a pastor by the name of Charles Neiman, who I consider not only a friend but a mentor, and he has a church called Abundant that he started in El Paso. And so I was talking to him recently, and I said, Charles, how many do you have on a Sunday? He goes, 12,000. I was like, oh, that's nice. The way he said it was so cavalier. And we were out to lunch one time, and a guy walked by outside of this window we were at, because we were in El Paso, and I was just, sometimes when he's in town, we go to lunch. And he pointed at this guy, and he goes, you see that guy? And I go, yeah. And he goes, he looks like an ordinary guy, right? I go, yeah, he's just like an ordinary guy in his 50s with tennis shoes. He goes, that man has the largest church in America. And I was like, really? Because I've never seen that guy before. And he said he has the largest church. He goes, his church is bigger than mine. I go, that's crazy, because your church is really, really big. And I go, how big is his church? He says his church is 500 people. I go, that's wild. He goes, in a town of 650. And so he goes, I have been to that church. I take every time I go to that church. He goes, that man has the biggest church and the most powerful church in America. He goes, 85% of that town comes in every Sunday and is on fire for God and is just changing that whole city. Give the Lord a clap for that. And so it's amazing what can happen when you have people who have purpose. We're in this series called Freedom, Purpose, Influence. And so today is called Purpose Sunday. So someone say Purpose Sunday. And so we're going to do this Sunday a little differently. I'm going to preach, and then my Uncle Tim is going to come up and take a purpose offering today. And last week we talked about freedom, right? And we talked about that Jesus is our freedom, and that's point number one, that Jesus is the door to freedom in our lives. And when I was preparing for this message and I was praying, the Lord really gave me a picture of this old memory that I had. And when I was in junior high, we were in the market to buy a house. And so my parents really wanted to buy a house because we had been renting for a long time. And this was a big deal because we had never really owned a house for most of my young life. And so they were building this new area called Ladera Ranch. Has anybody heard Ladera Ranch? I can see all the Mission Viejo people, all the Southern California people. And they were building this new community, and it was really a mound of dirt. Like when we went, I remember we went there, and it was literally a gigantic mound that had been like cut in half. And there was supposed to be a community that we built on top of this dirt mound. And so we went, and it was like a trailer, I think. It was something like that. And they had all these pictures of this house that they were selling. And I remember that my mom and my dad, I think the conversation in the car was something like, why don't we just go look? Why don't we just go check this out? Has anyone ever had like, let me go check this out moment, and then you walk away with like a new car? Or like maybe it's like, I'm just going to check this place out, and then you walk away with like a wife. Like how many, like we've all had moments where we were somewhere because we were trying to just check it out, and then we had like a life change in the checkout. And so that's what we were. We were supposed to just check out this property, right? And so we were there, and we were looking, and I never forget that we, right about halfway through that conversation with that listing agent person, something was up, because I didn't understand all the lingo, but I could understand something was going on. And I remember that my parents bought a house that day, and that was a huge thing. And so, but we didn't have a house. We had a picture of a house. And so we had to come back 6 months later, and the house was going to be on that slab that I guess we just bought. And so that was going to be our future house. And so I remember we even went out and we walked around the slab, and my mom and dad would ask me questions like, how great does this concrete look? And you're just looking, and I'm just like, okay, I guess this is going to be what the picture says is going to look like, and this is going to be my room up there somewhere. And so I just remember that we were so excited and that we were going to get this house. And I remember the day that the house came, and we got the keys to the house. That was a big thing. We got the keys to the house. And they had like a key ceremony, if I remember. It was like this big thing. All the houses in the neighborhood got keys. And it was probably not as big as I'm making it out to be. But when you're young, it seemed like a lot. And so I remember there was like a key situation, and it was on a ribbon, right, or something like that. And so we got this key to this house. And I remember going in, and it was wild because the day we went into the house was the day that we couldn't use the bottom of the house because one of the options that they had was custom homes. But we weren't in that custom home budget part of life. And so what my parents did was they bought the non-custom home, and then my dad customized it. So that was like, so I remember that all the other houses were ready, and they had real nice hardwood floors, and our house did not have none of those things. And it took like months to put them together. But I remember that when we did that, it was amazing how there was amazing how it became a home. And so there was a difference between the key to the house and living in the house. And so when I think about faith, and when we hear either Paul or the New Testament talk about faith, that's how it is in our Christian walk. And so Jesus is our freedom. We learned this last week. He is the key to freeing your life. And we talked about this, that Christianity, Christians, when we say we're followers of Jesus, Jesus has a certain vision of freedom that is similar but different to the vision that we have as a culture. It is amazing that as Americans and as people who live in the West, we live in a free society. And so when we think about freedom, what we often mean is freedom to choose. And so freedom to choose what soap to buy, freedom to choose what we think, freedom to choose where we go, freedom to choose what we do. And so when we think about freedom, we often think about choice. And so that's great. That's an amazing thing that we have choice in our lives. And so one of the things that is amazing about God is that God is not a tyrant. He's not the kind of king that gets you to do things by force. And so that's one of the amazing things when we come to God is that he gives us freedom. So he doesn't pressure us by forcing us or by fear or coercion or getting you. That's not God at all. But it's more than just freedom to choose. To be free in God is not just to have a choice, it's freedom to become. And because choosing is one thing, but you could have all the choice in the world and still be in bondage. You can have all the choice in the world and still suffer, and still be confused, and still feel less than, and still not have peace, and still miss your purpose and destiny. And so one of the amazing things about Jesus is that he gives us freedom to choose, as in he doesn't force or coerce, but he also gives you freedom to become. And so that's why when we say that Jesus gives us freedom, it always comes with from. Because we all have things in our lives that keep us in bondage, that have put us down. We have walls in our lives. We have things that have been said to us. We have experiences we had that have kept us in a certain way. So when Jesus comes to give you freedom, what he's doing is it's like a person coming and giving you a key to a house. And so if freedom is the key, if Jesus is the key, then purpose is the house. And so I want to take 20 minutes and explain this to you because I think so many people of faith will meet Jesus, they'll get the freedom, they got the key to the house, and then they stay, never moved in. Does that make sense? They read scripture and it's like being in that trailer. It's like, oh my gosh, like the swimming pool is going to be here. It's going to be great, right? There's going to be abundance and peace and purpose and destiny and all these things. And man, like they're selling a lifestyle. Like when you buy a house today, they just not selling you a house. They're selling you a lifestyle. Like you see yourself, right, with that French press every morning right outside on your French chair patio, gossiping about the neighbors and feeling good. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like we all do that. And so, but so often in our faith, I think that you see people come to Jesus, get free, get the keys, and they never move in. And part of the reason why they don't move in is because I think they don't even know in a way how to move in. And so that's why in this journey of this series of what is God's plan for your life, that's what we're answering, is that when you came to Jesus, God has a plan for you. He's like an architect. He's like a designer. He didn't just meet you and he's like creating the plan as he goes along. Like when he came and revealed himself to you, he has a plan for you. He knows you. He made you. He's waiting for you. He's behind you and below you and next to you and in front of you. There's nowhere you can go, nothing you could do, as Ephesians says, that could ever separate you from the love of God. And I love Paul. He says, I hope you might know how high and low and wide the breadth of his love. Translation, I think what Paul is saying is he's saying, I have pushed that line and done things that I wasn't sure I'd come back from, and God's love was still there. So he's saying that out of experience. He knows the depth of God's love. And he says you can live your whole life every day shocked at his love, and you're just scratching the surface of that love. And so when we say that God has a plan for you, God has a plan for you. He's like an architect. And so one of the things he does, the first thing he does, he gives you freedom. That's Jesus. And so that's what we talked about. Romans 8:2-1 for note takers. So therefore there is no condemnation for those in the Messiah. Someone say that's me. In the Messiah Jesus. Why not? Because the law of the Spirit of life in the Messiah, Jesus has released you from the law of sin and death. Translation, Jesus is your freedom. He is the key to unlocking freedom in your life. He's come in your life to bring you freedom. He does not condemn. He does not shame. He does not put you down. He doesn't remind you of who you were. He comes in, sees you as you are, knows you as you are, loves you as you are, and calls you. Does that make sense? And so part 2 of this, and this is point number 2, is that when God gives you freedom, he's giving you a key. And he's not just doing it to just free you. This is the key part of this service, is that he frees you for your purpose. So if freedom is the key, Jesus is the front door, the house is your purpose. The house is where you live. The house is where you make your home. The house is how you organize yourself. It's where you sleep and you cook and you have people over. It's your life. And so if Jesus' freedom is the doorway, then the purpose you receive is the life he is calling you to live in light of that freedom. And so I like to say it like this in a really powerful way. This is Ephesians 2:8. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. Someone say freedom. That's grace. And this is not from yourselves. It's a gift from God, not by works, so that you can boast. Created in Jesus Christ, and this is the house part, the purpose part, to do. In other words, he frees you so that you can be freed up. He gives you a key so you can live in. So God loves you so much that he doesn't just meet you where you're at and then free you and walk away. He meets you where you're at, gives you the keys, and then invites you in. And so many people, I think, they do that is they stop at the freedom part. They get so excited about the freedom part, but then they're wondering why, like, their life looks exactly like it did beforehand. They're still, like, struggling with the same things. And it's not that when you come to know the Lord, all your problems go away at once. It's that you are given a purpose. God frees you up to become a citizen of heaven, to become a person of God, to live and work and function and do like a member of his family. Does that make sense? And so I love this, Ephesians 2:18, that no one can boast. Created in Christ Jesus, that's you. You are created in Christ Jesus. You were freed, you're being healed, you're being transformed, you're being discipled, you're being renewed. Wisdom is imparted to you every Sunday. Every time you're here at 10 a.m. and you open your heart to God, God is healing you and restoring you and reminding you who you really are. He's building you up. The presence of God and the Spirit of God is behind you, lifting you up in all that you do. But it's for a purpose. This is something that I think the charismatic tradition, and I'm going to speak as someone raised as a Pentecostal, I think that we struggle with is that we love the power of God, but often we love it so much that we forget to do the things that the power is there to do. Am I preaching to anybody? Like, how many times have we gone to like a revival service and the glory is there and the Spirit is poured out and God's presence was everywhere, right? I mean, we talk about it for years and then everyone's all jazzed up and then we go home and then we're all like, yeah, well, I don't know what to do next. What's this about? Like, how often have we had that moment? Right? Because what often happens is we're great at the freedom, but we're not always that good at the purpose. And so we forget. It's like the house. We go to the signing and we're happy and we sign the contract and we got the key, right? And we're all there. We have a picture with the mayor in front. We get the shovel in the dirt. We get all that. And then we just walk away and we're like, there's a whole house. You were healed so that. Does that make sense? You went to that meeting and God showed you who you were on that Sunday, and you were crying and you felt like something that was missing was given back to you. Amazing. God just gave you a key for a purpose. He's got a purpose for your life. I don't care if you're 10 or 100. You have something left to give. You matter. You matter. You might not feel it. You might be looking at me like, Pastor, you don't know. I'm telling you right now, you matter. Your life matters, really. You might not even know the people that your life will matter to, but your life matters. There's a reason why God showed himself to you. He could have been anywhere in the world on any Sunday. Think about that. His presence could have been anywhere else. But he found you at 10:07 this morning in your chair when you lift your hands and you hear that voice that says, you're going to be okay in this moment. You might not have it all together, but you're a leader. What was that, God? I'm pulling a lot of weight at the moment. What are you talking about, leadership? I've never served a day in my life. I got problems, man. I can't be out there saying hi to people in the welcome team. Yeah. There is somebody who God has brought to this church so you can smile at them. I'm serious. I'm so serious. I'm serious as a heart attack. You were made for a purpose. You're made for a purpose. God has a purpose for your life. Everything he has done for you was on purpose. It was a freely given gift because God's amazing. But he's unlocking you. He's unlocking you. That's why we say this. God does not call the equipped. He equips the called. It's not by your strength, by his strength. That's the thing. All you got to do is walk through the door. But you got to be willing to do that. Because that can be a little scary sometimes. Yeah, growth is scary. And it's often hard. If you talk to successful people, I've been doing this thing through Thought Leaders where I've been just interviewing and talking to people that are hyper successful in business. And we had this call the other day on World Checker Society, my Uncle Tim's amazing men's thing. And so there's all these like powerful dudes, right? And a lot of them they're crushing it in business. They're just doing fantastic. All of them had awful stories. I'm talking tough situations they were in. Stuff that would have knocked out like 90% of people. Like, hey, I was 32 and I got fired, lost my health care, and my doctors said I'll never work again. Like that kind of stories. Followed by, I took 10 years, I put my best foot forward, I've leaned on God, I put it all in, and now I have a company worth $40 million a year. It was like, wow, like every single guy, there was not one dude on that call who like inherited, and they were just coasting. It was opposite. It was that you go through tough seasons, and within those tough seasons, what can happen is that God shows up. And that's the beautiful thing about God, is that he frees you for a purpose. And so the way that you lean in is that when you come to church and God's healing you, start looking for maybe why. That's, I think, where charismatics, we like love those conferences, right? The glory, right? Hundredfold. I love all those words, right? It's all yeah. And it's like, yeah, man, God just put you back together because he plans for you to change 5 generations of dysfunction. And so it's not enough just to free you. He's going to give you a purpose. So when God is doing something in your life, start looking for the purpose. If you hear anything to me today, I beg you, is that freedom and purpose go hand in hand. Freedom is step 1, purpose is step 2. God will never free you and then not give you a purpose. He frees you and then begins to show you why he freed you, what impact you're going to have, how you're going to change your family, how you're going to serve in this church, how you're going to step into leadership, how you're going to use your gifts and talents to make a difference in people's lives. If you don't clap for that, I don't know what I can say this morning. And so point number 3 for note takers, he does not save you from the world, but for the world. Jesus does not just save you from the world, but he has saved you for the world. He didn't just bring you out of your family. He plans on using you to change your family. He didn't bring you out of that neighborhood just to let you not be a blessing and a mentor to other people. He did not just put you back together so that you would just be back together. He is putting you back together, and then he's going to put people in your lane that you can start pouring into. That's the beautiful thing about church, is that when we come together as a family, we can do things together that we could not do on our own. What's true in business, what's true in family, is true in church. Is that when we come together and say, I am freed for a purpose, I am a leader. This is what I love, that share event. You had all these leaders. You had all these powerful, packed individuals who on their own can kick a lot of butt. I just said butt. They're all like that. But when we come together, 20 people touch 250. And every person in their life influences 1,000 people. That's a true statistic. If the average person impacts 1,000 people over their lifetime. So when there's somebody that you're praying for or encouraging or believing for, or if you're serving as an usher or you're serving the welcome team and you come in and you smile and you present to them excellence and you reflect God's goodness when you serve, when you guys are on the production team and you guys are doing your technical work, you're showing up on time, you're organizing the cameras, and someone who's on the other side of that camera who often emails us, hey, I'm watching from South Africa, hey, I'm watching from the Midwest, I don't know, God was speaking to me today. The amount of prayer requests or the amount of responses we get like that is that when we step up and we recognize that we are leaders, that we have purpose and influence, and we are free, what happens is that we begin to affect the people around us. And when we affect them, people begin to change, and they take that into their life. And so this is point number 4. Renewed people renewing others. I love this. Ephesians 4:22. To put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life, and is corrupt through deceitful desires. Who's a little happy that they let a little part of their old self go? And to be renewed in the spirit of your minds. And if the worship team could start making the way up. To put on a new self, created after the likeness of God, in true righteousness and holiness. Renewed people renewing others. I love this so much because when we step into God and God begins to free us, he gives us that key, and then we step into the house and we begin to experience a new way of living, our outlook begins to change. It begins to affect our mindset. And when our mindset begins to change, we start stepping into our new position. I remember a few years ago, a friend of mine asked me to go to dinner, and he's like my fancy friend. Who's got like a fancy friend? I have one or two fancy friends, fancier than me. Adam Camp, I'm calling him out. He's fancier than me. So he asked me to go to dinner, and he said he wanted to take me to the sushi place in L.A., so we ended up going, and it was really great. And I remember I sat down with him, and I said, hey, I go, where's the menu? And he goes, oh, no, they don't have menus here. And I was like, really? He goes, no. This is like a sushi place. They have a prepared plan. And I was like, I haven't done this before. I mean, I see that bill that I hope you're going to pay, but I haven't. This is cool. It's 50. Explain this to me. And because he's like a big sushi guy. And so he began to show me how to have like fancy people sushi. And it was so funny because he was teaching me how to hold the sushi, and there were all these things that I was doing. Did you know you're not supposed to put the ginger on top of the sushi and eat it? That's like very taboo. You're supposed to eat ginger in between each piece as a palate cleanser. I was like, oh my gosh, I've been looking foolish for 10 years. And by the end of that night, it was so funny because I was so feeling myself in the experience that when I was done, and I was talking to my family about it, I started telling them all the things I had learned, like, oh, you're doing this wrong. Like, you need to do it this way. And it was so funny because in that moment, it's amazing that when you're exposed to a new life, it begins to change your life. And so for this whole time, I was putting ginger on sushi. But when I had it how it was really supposed to be, it just opened it up. And so that's how purpose is that Jesus gives you the freedom. That's the key. But purpose is the life of God. So when you said yes to Jesus, you said yes to freedom, but you said yes to living a lifestyle of purpose. And so you might not feel like a leader. I'm telling you right now, God is making you into a leader. He is planting those seeds. Yeah. And my final closing principle is this. God is freeing you for a purpose. And so the way you want to respond to the freedom that you're getting is you want to open yourself up to what God wants to do next. And so every time he heals you, every time he transforms you, every time he's talking to you, just know God's got a plan for you. And that's just phase 1. And so purpose is coming so that you can have influence. That's next week. I'm done preaching.